Hail friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ear, or whatever it is, for a video, about a bit of a different video, this one. I'm going to be talking about gaming in general. I'll probably split the video up into two parts. The first part will be about my experiences with gaming, just to give you if you're new to the channel, just to give you some sort of idea of where I'm coming from a gaming perspective, what my gaming roots were. And the second half of it will be talking about modern gaming over the last maybe 5 to 10 years or so, and where it is. But I'll start off with a brief kind of history of gaming for me. This is the narcissistic part. Now, I've got my three earliest memories of gaming. I'm not quite sure what the timeline was, but I started gaming around the late 70s, early 80s, where you probably wouldn't identify them as games nowadays, but they were. I mean, the first one was on a ZX80 or 81, which was a computer. I think it was by Sir, what was his name? It's Clive Sinclair, who created the Spectrum range of computers. I think it was. I can't remember if it was ZX80 or 81, but it was a friend, their older brother had it basically. And it was I was going to say horizontally scrolling shoot 'em up, but there wasn't really any scrolling. You know, your ship was a greater than sign, and you moved it up and down the lines, and other keyboard symbols moved along the lines very slowly. And when you got onto the line with a symbol, you press spacebar, and the symbol vanished, or you killed it essentially. That was my first shoot 'em up experience. Well, when I think back now, obviously you look at it through the eyes of like I don't know, a 10 or 11-year-old, and you're like, wow, you know. And I think that might be the theme of the video going forward, of how the nostalgia and can you recreate those early times when you first got into gaming. But the second memory I've got is playing the Atari VCS. A friend next door was a couple of years older than me. He got it for Christmas, and we would spend school summer holidays and Christmas holidays playing Space Invaders and Combat, essentially, and have a thoroughly fantastic time. And I think the thing that really got me onto gaming was I played The Hobbit. I think it was on the Spectrum. Yeah, it was The Hobbit. I played it on the Spectrum, and that was really quite mind blowing. Like even though they were just, I guess by today's standards, quite poorly drawn visuals. You know, at the time, I mean, I still like them today, but at the time, very atmospherically immersive drawn visuals with the text underneath, and yeah, essentially you're kind of playing through The Hobbit. And it was also what got me into Tolkien and led me on to other things as well. It's funny because I think computer gaming got me into made me see like a wider vision of kind of like geek culture, and it got me into lots of other different things. So through playing The Hobbit, I became a Tolkien disciple. I got into adventure and role-playing games through playing role-playing games, playing games in general. I got into a job in a computer game shop. I was one of those people who left school and didn't really know what to do with themselves, to be honest with you. So I ended up working in retail. I think that's probably quite a common story. But I didn't want to work in any retail, so I made sure I got a job in a computer game shop. And through the computer game shop, I got into my first like role playing group, basically. So yeah, it's funny how that one game kind of sparked off me branching out into other areas of the subculture. But Hobbit was really atmospheric, and you kind of go back to it today, and you can see some faults, obviously, with certain things where, you know, there are certain parts where if you don't do it in the correct order, you get one shotted and that kind of stuff. But you know, that's just what games were like at the time. And yeah, I moved on to well before that I got my own computers. So this would have been I don't know, Commodore 16. I was going to get Commodore 16, but then Commodore 64 came out. And we weren't, you know, I come from actually quite a poor to very poor background. Christmas presents were something that, you know, your parents kind of really worked hard to get you. And my Commodore 64 was probably the greatest present I've ever got, I would say, as a child. And it was just mind boggling, you know, opening the package on Christmas Day and taking out the great big beige brick beast and plugging it in and loading up games and playing them. It was, and that was my first. That was my first computer. And you know, nostalgia is overwhelming sometimes when you kind of think about getting your first computer and playing your first games. And obviously, when you get your own computer, it also then opens up another world of you finding like magazines to read. So reading about other people's experiences, reading other gamers, reviewers' reviews of games and what they think of them. Looking at adverts and ordering stuff, going out to buy your first computer game. I'm not sure. I do remember getting on a bus going to a local record store because we didn't really have a dedicated computer game store near where I lived, or not that was, not for my age, not that was within, reasonable travelling distance that my mum was happy with me doing. But I remember getting on a bus and going to a local place. It was a record shop called Melody Man. Or Melody Maker, one of those two. Might be. I think it was Melody Man because it was just one old bloke. But a record shop, they sold computer games. I remember getting on a bus going there and buying a game. That's my kind of earliest recollection of going and buying my own game. So yeah, so people think computers are quite kind of insular and you're always indoors and stuff, but they do open up other avenues to different things that are more sociable. Because I was a lot more sociable back then. When you're a kid, I guess there are certain things that you just don't cross your mind, and you're a lot less. I guess you're just more. I wouldn't say braver, but you're just not as aware, are you? So it's a bit like creating your first computer game where you don't know what you can't do or what you shouldn't be doing, so you kind of just go for it. But yeah, the Commodore 64 was my first computer, and that led me into working at a computer game shop and a comic shop, and I met some guys there, and that was my first D&D group. And yeah, it was great times. After that, I went and worked. I stayed in computer retail, but I went and worked on Tottenham Court Road, which was like the mecca for kind of electronics and computers in London. I'm not sure if it still is, but it was at the time. It was like Akihabara in Japan, but maybe not as impressive, and certainly not as neon. But yeah, it was the place you went for electronics and stuff in London, or in England or the UK. Indeed, I'm not sure if there was anywhere else like it. And I worked for a company called Silica Systems, who were the biggest distributors and retailers of the Atari ST and the Amiga. So working in there was like, wow, and I had an Amiga already. I missed the Amiga 1000. That was slightly earlier for me. Although it could play games, I think it was really released as a graphics machine, because for video editing and stuff, because the Amiga was very good at that. But I got an Amiga 500. I went and worked in a place that sold Amigas and all the peripheries and games and graphics programs and whatever it may be. I was working with a load of people who are all into the scene, because we were really into the scene. It wasn't just about the games and stuff. It was about the Amiga itself, or the Atari ST being into the scene, showing each other demos and graphic demos, sound demos, whatever it may be, bringing cover discs in, saying, look at this demo on here, that kind of stuff. Obviously, gaming was a big part of it as well. But yeah, that was a fantastic time, like getting into the Commodore 64 and then going through getting an Amiga and working in these stores, because I was working with people who felt exactly the same as me. And I don't know hardly anyone now who feels the same way as me about things, particularly about computers. I mean, my boys play games a lot, so that's good. But yeah, at the time, like, we were all young men mostly, and we were really into the Amiga scene or the Atari ST scene, and it was just a fantastic time. A lot of people kind of talk about the 8-bit into 16-bit being kind of the golden age of consoles as well, like the Mega Drive and stuff, being the golden age of gaming, and I kind of agree with that. I guess maybe some younger gamers might consider the last 10 years as the golden age, but really, nostalgia aside, like quality gaming mechanics wise, I think things have really, really gone backwards. But it wasn't just about the Amiga. I used to import Japanese consoles as well. So I imported the Mega Drive when it came out, Super Famicom, like PC Engine. I was always a bit of a gaijin. I still am now. I've always loved Japanese culture, particularly Japanese kind of electronic and gaming culture, and manga as well, particularly. So I used to import Japanese consoles as well. I think the PC Engine was the most interesting console that I've ever owned. It was strange. It was such a small box when it was initially released. You could get a CD add-on later on, but such a small box. And They called it 16-bit. I think it had a 16-bit graphics chip. It had an 8-bit processor, but some of the stuff they did with it was just phenomenal. You know, some of the really big Japanese game developers at the time like really worked that console hard. And like arcade conversions like R-Type and stuff are still probably the best conversions around, unless you kind of get like emulated stuff on the later consoles or whatever it may be. But yeah, Neo Geo as well. That was a. Whew, I, I would buy Neo Geo with a game, and I'd own it for a bit, then I'd sell it, and I'd buy it again because I just couldn't afford the games. That was a problem. I couldn't afford a library of games, and believe it or not, it was quite difficult to like trade in or sell games at that time. You know, so selling a Neo Geo game and to buy another one or to fund another game was quite difficult. It wasn't until a bit later on that, particularly Neo Geo stuff, because not really many people wanted it. You couldn't really go into a shop and sell it second hand because they just wouldn't know what to do with it. Like Mega Drive and Famicom and all that sort of stuff was still pretty, was pretty popular on the exchanging and stuff. But Neo Geo stuff was difficult. PC Engine stuff as well was quite difficult. But because you imported a lot of stuff, you kind of you had to be a bit more careful of what you were buying because you didn't want to pay 50 quid for a Japanese import Mega Drive game, and it was just terrible, you know. So you're a bit more careful. But the Amiga was really the machine. Like if I had to pick a machine that was identified me in computing, it would be the Amiga. And I still keep thinking about getting one back. There's a guy on Facebook who's actually, I think he's actually quite near to me, not very far away at all, who refurbishes Amigas and sells them on, and he does Amiga 1200s. And I keep thinking, although you can quite easily emulate this stuff now, you know, I kind of keep thinking about getting an Amiga 1200 and running it through like a RetroTink or something, and doing some content for the channel. But you know, maybe that's something for the future. But yeah, the Amiga was the Amiga was the machine that I identified with, and some of my favourite games are on there. Like on Commodore 64, you got games like Paradroid, Elite. Just absolutely fantastic games. I think would still be great experiences now on the Amiga. You know, Dungeon Master, Eye of the Beholder, loads of role-playing games, loads of point-and-click adventures. The Amiga had some great arcade conversions as well. I mean, I don't know, a lot of people rag on the 16-bit computers for arcade conversions, but a lot of that was. I personally think the Amiga was probably at least as powerful graphically as a Mega Drive, but they just didn't. It's what you would find with like Mega Drive or Super Famicom ports of arcade games was that they were either done. But they were either done by the original developers or by a team of hand-picked people by the original developers. Whereas in the UK, a lot of arcade conversions were done by like just British coders who were saying, look, you know, convert this to the 64, convert this to the Amiga. Quite often they didn't even have the code. You know, they might be able to play the arcade game if they were lucky, and they had to copy the arcade game just through playing it. But it did have some great arcade. There are some arcade conversions on there that showed what you could really do if it had the chance. But after that kind of 16-bit period, I really kind of moved away from consoles. It all became about PCs. I did get a PlayStation 1. I paid so much for a Japanese. I paid a fortune for one of the first Japanese PS1s kind of shipped into PlayStation 1s shipped into the country. Just far too much money. But when I got it home and I loaded up Ridge Racer and I was playing Ridge Racer, I forgot about the money. You know, it was just amazing. You know, but what a first experience that was of a new console, like loading up Ridge Racer, just phenomenal. I did get a PS2 and then I got a PS3, but the PS3 was the last computer where I wasn't really into the American console thing, like the Xbox thing. It wasn't really. I'd kind of moved on to PCs by then, so I kind of felt that I didn't need one. But I kept up with the PlayStation a bit just because I was still into the Japanese stuff, and the Japanese games coming out at the time were still like real classics on those consoles. Obviously, as things have gone on, you know, all games have become a bit sterile. Really, they've all become the same, a bit homogenized. You still get Japanese games coming out that feel quite Japanese, but quite often by the time they get here, they've gone through the old what do you call it? Translation filter, So things are not always as they seem in these games. And they're just not what they were. You know, there was you could really easily tell a game that was developed in Japan to a game that was developed in the West back in those days. It was just obvious. And the Japanese games offered something that the Western games didn't. Now I'm kind of not so sure. I'm sure. I mean, I kind of enjoy the what they called. I enjoy the Yakuza games. So I guess they're probably still a series that you could say are still quite very different from Western games. But I think it's harder to tell them apart now, unfortunately. And I think a lot of the Japanese developers have Western publishing and Western development. So like a Japanese developer may be funding a Western developer divesting a game, which is kind of like a Western game, really. Then not really Japanese, but yeah, it's after that it became mostly about PCs. It was all about PC gaming, loads of DOS gaming, loads of. Going back to Commodore 64, you used to load games through a tape, believe it or not. Cassette tape. Most people don't even know what cassette tapes are now. I say most people. It's probably it's probably some of you out there that are not young enough to know. You're not young enough to know what a cassette tape is. And it was music came on cassette tapes as well, and so did the games. And you put it in the tape deck, and you loaded it up, and it took ages, and it might not work. And that could be down to like head alignment on the actual tape deck itself. So when you got I kind of got a few copied games on a Commodore 64 because back then you could get a double tape deck and you could copy from one tape to another and record it, and it would just record it onto a blank tape. But depending on the head alignment of the tape, the tape might not work. So then you'd get like a small screwdriver, like a jeweler screwdriver or something, and you would move the heads until it worked. It could take hours just to get one game working. But then obviously you'd move the heads, so they were out of general alignment for most retail games. So then it got to a point where I was forever changing my head alignment, trying to get different games to work. Later on, they did release a tape deck that it had its own knob to adjust the heads. It had like a light indicator to tell you when the heads were in the right place. But yeah, that was a thing. And obviously onto the Amiga and the PC, 5.25-inch floppy disks and 3.5-inch floppy disks. I did get a floppy disk drive for the Commodore 64 towards the end of my time with it, and that was like, it felt instantaneous almost. You put a disc in. I think it was a 1541 disk drive. Put a disc in, loaded it up, and the loading felt almost instantaneous in comparison. It was. It was pretty cool. But then it was all about PC gaming, DOS gaming. We did have, it's funny because we talk about the quality of games now from how games are released and bugs and stuff. But you had issues, you had different issues to deal with back then. Obviously, a game came on tapes, which and obviously not as foolproof. From a technology point of view, as just downloading a game. So you would get issues with the tape. It might get demagnetized or some other issue. It's a physical thing and it's quite delicate, so it might get damaged quite easily in some way. Like when I got into DOS gaming, there was a thing about DOS base. So like PCs at the time had a 640k base RAM, and most games kind of, I'm not quite sure what code needed to use it, but games needed to use as much of that as possible, but your kind of like some of your system stuff would load into that base RAM as well. So quite often you'd have to like run batch files and stuff to free up as much base memory as you could, otherwise the game wouldn't run. That was always a fun thing to do. And obviously you still had a problem with discs getting damaged and whatever it was. Very different from CDs when we moved on to CDs. It came with its own set of issues with regards to getting games going. I mean, when you were playing DOS games back in the day, you had to be like slightly competent in understanding memory and creating batch files and that kind of stuff that people just would not accept doing today. All games are downloaded anyway, so it's kind of irrelevant. And with Windows, the way Windows is now, it's not foolproof, but you don't really need to know a lot. Most people can just load up a PC, boot up their PC, and just double click an icon, and the game works for the most part. So we had our own issues to tend with back then, but games did generally just work though for the most part out of the box. I worked for After I left working on Tottenham Court Road, I went to work for Virgin Interactive Entertainment for a short period of time, who were a publisher, and we worked with some really big people at the time. We were publishing games in the UK for like LucasArts, Capcom. I was there when Resident Evil 1 and 2 came out. Some great LucasArts games came through there. Westwood Studios, Command and Conquer, Red Alert, all those kind of games, and that was a great period as well to work there. There was some fantastic that was like a I think that kind of period, like 90s, maybe early to mid 90s, or maybe mostly through the 90s into the early 2000s. That was kind of like the PC golden age, I think. Looking at some of the games that came out then, and I worked for the publisher, and it was a great time. But we would occasionally have like a patch on a floppy disk that we would post out to a customer for a certain issue. But mostly games just worked. That you did get bugs and stuff, but I don't remember them being, certainly for game. We also published games for BioWare, I think. Yeah, so we like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 came through the company when I was working there. And we sold those games, and they mostly just worked. There might have been a patch or so for them, but the internet wasn't particularly big at the time. So yeah, it was a case of sending out a floppy every now and again. But mostly games were fine, particularly if it was a console game. Obviously, it came out, and because PlayStation and PS2 and stuff weren't generally connected to the internet for patches and whatnot, games mostly just worked. And if there were little issues and stuff, you just ignored them, or you tried to work around them. I'm not saying there weren't any issues, but it was generally the games released in a much higher, what you would consider more of a finished state than they do now. And that was it. And then obviously we moved into Windows and stuff, and I was like an early adopter for the internet, and I tried to keep up with the internet speeds as I upgraded them. And that was my first encounter. That was my first encounter with MMOs was Ultima Online. I was shopping in the Virgin Megastore in London on the corner of Oxford Street and Tottenham Court Road. I don't know if it's still there or not, but I saw this box on the shelf. I knew the Ultima games. I went and picked it up. And yeah, I looked on the back. It said internet connection required. Play with hundreds of other players in a fantasy Ultima world created by Lord British, that kind of stuff. And I was like, wow. And I took it home, and that was my first MMO experience. Looking back, it wasn't always good. I kind of, it's funny when obviously it's all relative, so it's what you're used to. But back in the day, like the internet connections were so slow, and you paid by the minute. So when it's not like now where you pay $30 a month or £30 a month, and you got unlimited access at home. You literally paid by the minute because it was using your telephone line. It was like making a telephone call. So not only were the costs high, but the speeds were slow enough, even for a sprite-based game like Ultima Online, where if you ran into a populated area, your computer the game would just stop for a few seconds, and your character would run a few steps, and it would stop. And you just you'd wait until you got out of the populated area so the game started running reasonably well again. I mean, people complain about games now and how they're released and how they may work, and they're valid, they're valid criticisms. But you imagine playing an MMO now, and imagine playing Diablo 4 now, and you ran into a town, and your character kept stopping because your internet connection couldn't keep up. And you had to go through this process just to get through and carry on playing the game. Yeah, I mean sometimes you couldn't play the game at all. I couldn't go to like East Britannia Bank in Ultra Online. I couldn't really go there in the early days because that's where everyone was selling their stuff. There was loads of people hanging around, and my computer the game would just stop basically. It couldn't keep up with what was going on the screen. And then I moved on to EverQuest after that, and this is also playing on American servers. So I was playing these MMOs when there weren't any European or UK servers. It was all American until a bit later on. So yeah, I got into EverQuest as well. And that's it really. And it's funny because there were long periods during my heavily MMO playing days where I kind of missed quite a lot of single player games because with MMOs, it's funny. I still feel it now. You kind of feel that it's a bit like live service games now. if you're not logging in and playing every day, you get a bit FOMO. You kind of feel like you're missing out on something like progression or whatever it may be, or just interacting with your friends. Yeah, it was the same back then. You kind of felt you had to be logging in. So I did miss some single player games that I, now gone back and played and caught up with. Yeah, but MMOs at the time, it was a revelation. I didn't, talking about issues running games and stuff, I didn't mind the fact that my character was so slow and the game would pause, because it was like, wow, I'm in a game with loads of other people. It was unheard of, unless you played like the early MUDs and stuff. And even then, like, they would have been mostly text and, ASCII based. Then it was probably, certainly my first experience of playing an MMO, and I didn't mind the foibles really. And it's funny going back to looking at Ultra Online and seeing the regression, like how much MMOs have regressed. I mean, Ultra Online had a really deep, it was isometric, like sprite based, but even so, it had a really deep like crafting system, a really deep housing system. Like pretty much every chair, table, knife, fork, item, whatever in the game, you could move around and place where you want. You could just put anything down on the ground and pick it up again. I just feel that things have just regressed so much from an MMO point of view. And I don't mean just like dumbing down. I just think that they're just designed a different way now, maybe for a different audience. I guess maybe that's it. If you're 20 and you're currently playing, World of Warcraft or whatever, then that's just how it is. You don't know any different, I suppose. But for someone who played Ultra Online and EverQuest and seeing how detailed those games were and like where MMOs are now, no matter how big and flashy they are and whatnot, from a mechanics and a systems point of view, like, they're really, really dumbed down. It's but I don't know. Maybe things will change again and we'll come around and we'll be going from a more deeper kind of mechanical MMOs with more systems and more randomness. But we'll see. Yeah. So just to sum up, I've just been a PC gamer since then, and I think I've probably played most PC games, at least a bit. Most MMOs anyway that have come out, and I've played all the PC classics and whatnot and stuff. And yeah, I think that's my gaming history. Started off long time ago playing games that didn't even look like games particularly, and it's where we are now. And I've never got bored of it. It's funny, people occasionally, not often. It's very easy to criticise people online, but when you're like a fairly big, burly, bearded bloke standing in front of someone and you tell them they play computer games, they're less inclined to, to criticise you about it. But occasionally I've had people say, oh, didn't you grow out of that and stuff? And I didn't. No, I never did. No, I never did. It was, I think I guess it'd be like being a kid and maybe you get into cars or aeroplanes or whatever it is, or like war history or whatever it may be, and you don't lose that. You don't lose that enthusiasm for it. I played some games. I was absolutely enthralled from the off, and it's never left me. I think some of that was partly due to playing through a particular era. I think like getting a computer at a young age and being exposed to it at that age, and then working in shops and being with loads of other young people who were also into games. I think that really, really helps. And it really kind of like fueled my passion for them. But yeah, even now, gaming is a massive part of my life, and I think it always will be. I'll definitely be a granddad on Twitch. Hopefully, I get that far. An old granddad, I should say, and still playing games. And long may it continue. So moving on to kind of talking about gaming now. I mean, gaming now there's a lot of negativity around it, and I'll try and be. I'm going to split this up into a couple of parts. Probably, I'm going to leave the final part till the end, and the final part is about the political impact on gaming. And I know some of you might not want to listen to that, so I'll leave it till the end. But looking at how games are designed now and the monetisation and whatever it may be, there are some real issues. I think these issues are feeding into certain type of games, and that's why the quality feels so bad. I mean, maybe maybe many of you find that AAA games have got good mechanics when they work, but the issue is the bugs and the state of how games are released and how they're monetized. So if we look at the monetization side of things first, we do have to take some responsibility for this and some blame. First of all, I think the cost of games. I don't think the cost of games is very high. I do think I don't like the way they split games up into standard edition, mega edition, super mega edition, super duper, apps megging awesome edition. I don't like that. I think you should pay a base price and you get all the content. Maybe that base price might be a bit higher than the standard edition, because games are really, in many instances, games are cheaper than they used to be. Like particularly on consoles, if you go back to the Mega Drive and the Super Famicom era, games were more expensive than they are now. I mean, they were cartridge based; they cost more to produce, but even so, games now for the hours of entertainment they provide, I think, are very, very cheap. It's how they're choosing to monetize them. I don't like this stand. I don't like all these different editions. Now, saying that, I'm a sucker for physical copies of games, and I used to collect games like physical copies. I don't do it anymore. I'm kind of selling off a lot of stuff, but I used to collect games, and I'm still a sucker for special edition physical copies that have got like the action figure and the map and all that kind of stuff. But so I guess in that sense, I'm a bit of a sucker for that kind of thing. But I do think that if you want to buy a digital game, you shouldn't have all these different options. You pay a bit more, and then But I can understand the developers from one aspect. Game prices have not really gone up, unless you buy the super duper editions that have got loads of other stuff that you're probably never going to want anyway. And the cost of development has increased as well dramatically. Some of that is down to mismanagement. I don't know. When I play a game like Starfield, and I look at the game and I play it, and I even trying to be as unbiased and as subjective as I can, I can't see why that game cost so much money to make and why it took so many people to make it. That's a management issue, I think. I don't think it should have cost that much. I think the thing is just games like Starfield. You listen to that stupid main writer that they've had at the company for quite a while now, who really should have been fired a long time ago, talking about the games not having any plan or written down guide or whatever. Well, that's where costs snowball out of proportion, really. Games are more expensive to make, I understand that, but I think through mismanagement that they cost a lot more than they should do. It's a bit like the the high speed train one network thing in the UK at the moment. That £1 billion over what it should have cost, probably down to mismanagement. There must be a more efficient way of doing this, and I'm sure there is. But I do feel some sympathy from a cost point of view, but the way things are monetized are a massive issue. So if we talk about monetization, first of all, if you look at kickstarting and crowdfunding, this is a tricky one because you've got FOMO, right? So for me personally, if the designers of Dungeon Master or I don't think Andrew Braybrook is still with us, but all the developers of Paradroid or the developer of Eye of the Beholder or EverQuest or whatever it may be, any one of my favourite games comes forward and says, Bob, I'm creating a game for you, my son. I'm back. I want to create a game specifically for you. It's based on my last game, Universe Design, that you loved, and I'm coming back and I'm going to make it for you, and I want some money. It's difficult not to give them money. And the Kickstarter thing is a real quandary, because I think kickstarting is an excuse. I think we're encouraging developers to then not finish by paying them up front. We're encouraging them not. There's less pressure for them to produce a good product, or even to produce a game that actually comes out, because you lose your Kickstarter money. You don't get it back, which I find absolutely ridiculous. There should be some responsibility on the developers if something falls through. If you give them money up front, but you don't. You quite often you lose your money. I think giving someone money up front for something they haven't even really developed yet is just a, yeah, I think it's a red flag. I think for some people it gives them an excuse then to take a decade to produce something, and then after a decade it doesn't even really come out. In Pantheon's case, I mean, people criticise Star Citizen, but I do understand that, but at least I can play Star Citizen, and when I'm playing it, it does give me an experience that no other game gives me, whereas certain other games no. So Kickstarter is an issue because I can understand the fear of missing out. Like if my favourite developer comes along and says, I'm creating a game especially for you, you're going to love it. You think to yourself, well, if I don't give them any money, they can't make the game. So I'm going to give them some money, But there is a problem there, and I do think for some developers it's giving them an excuse then not to ever finish the project. I don't think we should pay up front for something that's not even in alpha yet. So that's a bit of a problem, but I can understand why we do it. The pre-ordering side of things is another issue. We need to stop pre-ordering games. I know people won't stop pre-ordering games, but we need to. Because again, it's just an excuse for developers to then, they've already got the money, so they sit back. The other thing as well is that we don't, with Kickstarter, the game's not even really started yet, apart from some concepts. But with pre-orders don't start until the game is kind of a few months away from being delivered. But it's the same situation. We're giving the money up front. We've got no idea how that game is going to release. It could be like a lot of AAA games now. The release could be an absolute shambles. And if you're working on maybe the last gen consoles and stuff, and you've pre-ordered the game and it comes out, it's just unplayable. It's an issue. So I think pre-ordering is more on us. I can understand the FOMO of Kickstarter, as I said, but from pre-ordering, I think that the thing with pre-ordering as well is that unless you're buying a physical edition of the game, you're not really missing out because the game's still available. It's not like not supporting a Kickstarting campaign and the game never comes out because it wasn't supported. If you don't need to I mean, I did. I'm not going to anymore, but I pre-ordered Starfield. I pre-ordered it because I got the physical edition. But if I wasn't going to get the physical edition, I didn't need to pre-order it because there's no missing out. Apart from getting in on day one, there's no real missing out. The game's still going to be available. So I do feel that we need to stop pre-ordering. I'm stopping pre-ordering, but I'm stopping it more from the point of view of the political aspect rather than how the games are released. I know most people will look at how games are released, and that's a problem. But for me, it's the political stuff. But I'll deal with that at the end. But again, it is quite a bind though, when games that I'm looking forward to this year are very few and far between, and one of them is Stalker 2. I hope Stalker 2 releases obviously in a good state. I hope it avoids a lot of the ESG woke stuff as well. I don't know if it's got ESG funding, but again, I'll talk about that at the end. And I got an email saying, look at this lovely shiny Stalker 2 collector's edition. It's really expensive, like it's about $300. But I look at it and it's like, it's got an amazing action. It's got what looks like a fantastic action figure. And it's got all these little bits and pieces and extras and maps and stuff with it. And I kind of think, I can sit here and I can have that map open. And I'm like, I'll really be a stalker, in my mind. So it's going to be really hard not to pre-order that. And I'm telling you not to pre-order games, and that's the real bind, isn't it? It's, we know McDonald's is crap for us, and when I say McDonald's is crap for us, I mean the carbohydrate, not the actual meat. But we still eat it. It's so difficult, and I need to resist ordering the Stalker 2 thing, but I don't know if I'll be able to. I hope enough information comes out about the game beforehand so I can make a decision based on whether I want to pre-order it or not. And then I can kind of happily pre-order it and everything's okay. But I think pre-ordering is an issue as well. We're just giving companies money really before they're giving us anything to look at. This kind of early access MMO development type thing as well is something that I really, really don't like. I mean, I admire like the Monsters and Memories team for not taking anyone's money up front. I think that's the right thing to do. I just think it just leads to this thing again where, you pay people money up front. The game never really comes out. When it does come out, it's not really in a finished state. and the game doesn't do particularly well, so then the developers don't have enough money to keep up development, and this happened to quite a lot of MMOs that have come out, particularly indie ones. And obviously then you're on the other side of the fence with that. You've got AAA indie MMOs that, people seem to be just playing less, and they're looking for something else. But monetization is an issue on those fronts. And then we come to the real big problems, I think, and that's like, loot boxes, cash shops, all that kind of stuff. Now, as I said at the beginning of talking about the financial side of things, I don't mind this kind of stuff. I don't mind there being a cash shop selling cosmetics or whatever it may be. To be honest with you, I know most people probably hate them, but I don't even mind developers selling stuff that boosts a character. Maybe it's an MMO and you could buy a potion that gives you, I don't know, 20% extra XP for a day or something. I don't care about that stuff. I'm just not. It's not that I'm not competitive, but in the long run, it has no effect on me, really. If someone levels 20% quicker than me, people are going to do that anyway, whether they've got a potion or not. So that kind of stuff doesn't bother me, but I do understand why it might bother some players. What I don't like are publishers preying on vulnerable people and human nature as well. I mean, I guess we've all seen them, but these videos of loads of developers sitting around at a conference and they've got some psychologist basically telling them how to fleece as much money as they can out of people, and not just any gamer. They also talk about playing on people's psychology, people's weaknesses, people with gambling addictions, people just exploiting human nature, fear of missing out, all that kind of stuff. And I think we need to take some responsibility for that. But when game publishers and developers are being trained to exploit us in that way, I think that is, that's not good. That's terrible. That is really, really bad news. It's shameful, actually, and it should be illegal. And there are some countries that are kind of working towards dealing with this stuff. But whether they do or not, I don't know. But I remember hearing one story a while back about it was a shoot 'em up. I don't know what it was, an FPS. I don't know what one it was. I don't want to name it because I might be wrong. It was probably like Battlefront or COD or something. I don't know which one it was, but they were pairing new players with an experienced player who had loads of kit, and the idea behind it was that the experienced player would run around in all their posh armor and guns and skins and stuff, and the new players would go, "Oh, look at that! Like, can I look like that?" And they go, "Yes, you can. Click on this button. There's a cash shop." That's that kind of scummy stuff, like really playing on people's addictions. Now, I mean, I don't mind RNG to a certain extent. I mean, I went to a Gamescom type thing once, a long time ago in the early 90s, I think it was, roundabouts. And I got into Magic pretty much as soon as Magic came out. And Wizards of the Coast had a table. Wizards of the Coast then, when they were a good company, they were selling boosters at a table. You could only kind of queue up and buy a pack from each set that they had, but you could go around and queue up again if you wanted to. I can't remember what they're selling at the time. It was probably like Arabian Nights, maybe, like or beta or revised or whatever it was. But yeah, I mean, I don't mind RNG, but because buying Magic packs or any collectible card game or collectible game is RNG, but at least you're getting a physical thing that you can actually hold and play. And the thing with those things as well is that you can kind of trade and sell them and swap them. So quite often, even if you buy a pack and you get some cards you don't want, you can trade them for cards maybe you do want. So it's RNG, but at least there's something there physically you can see. But things like loot boxes and stuff in games, I just find a bizarre concept, and I don't. That's the kind of stuff that really preys on people with like gambling addictions and things. Not even a gambling addiction. I mean, I remember there's an excitement about opening a Magic pack just to see what you're going to get, that kind of dopamine hit. So I think loot boxes and that kind of thing are really, that's kind of like what I would draw the line. If you've got a cash shop, we need to be more responsible for ourselves. So don't spend money in a cash shop. But for loot boxes and stuff, I just think that kind of thing is it's just difficult because people, as I said, people with a gambling addiction are more likely to be into the loot box thing because it's the RNG that kind of gets them going. It's a real, and that's where they're preying on people, and that's where I think it needs to stop. But it doesn't look like it's going to stop. I mean, there's a lot of people at the moment, a lot of reviewers and stuff have played the new Warner Brothers game. Is it the Suicide Squad game? And they're all ripping it apart, and I'm not sure when it was. I think it was before the testing and stuff. I think the head of Warner Brothers said that going forward, all of our games may be these kind of live service games with cash shops and stuff. And yeah, I guess we need to move on to live service games. So I think this is where a lot of the issues are. What is a live service game? Something that is always online. Why does it always need to be online? Well, because then you've always got the chance of seeing someone who may have bought something in a shop or whatever, or got from a loot crate that you look at and you think, oh, I want one of those. If you're always online, you've always got access to the shop. It was bizarre when Diablo 4 came out, and I tried to play it on release and I couldn't because I was in a queue. And I mentioned it in a video, and people thought I was moaning. It's like Diablo 4 has got some MMO components to it, but to play through the story and stuff, you don't require them. Diablo 4 is primarily a single player game. Even when you see all the big streamers playing it on Twitch and stuff when it came out, they were playing it on their own because they were grinding level 100, they were doing hardcore or whatever it was. It's essentially a single player game. And to have to log into the internet to this live service to play the campaign component of Diablo 4 is ridiculous. Not just Diablo 4, but any game. And I can't believe there are people that make excuses for it. But then there are people that make excuses for Starfield. But so what can you do? I guess that's just how it is. It's bizarre, but there you go. I don't understand this live service thing. Particularly in a game that it has always been primarily, an offline game. I know that Diablo 2 and Diablo 1 you could play multiplayer and whatnot, but most people either running through the story or farming bosses or whatever it may be in Diablo 2 or whatever it was will be doing it on their own for the most part. And even like when I watched some streamers playing Diablo 4, and there was a bit of an exploit where you could group up and you go into a dungeon and you would clear out different parts of it and whatnot. They're still doing that bit on their own. They're just in a group because there was an exploit that meant it was worth doing that. So the live service thing I don't understand. And I think also it obviously feeds into the previous topic about cash shops and stuff, is that if you're always online, there's always an opportunity for them to sell you something. But also if you're always online, you're left with a situation where you might pay a lot of money to play Diablo 4 on release, and you can't because you're in a queue. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But there you go. But that's it. I think the live service thing is obviously all part of the cash shop, loot box and all that kind of thing. And from a quality of game point of view, the real issue here is that for many of these live service games, the games are made less fun, so you spend money to make them more fun. That's the one of the real issues here, where it's like creating an ice cream sundae, but then you remove some of the nice bits, like maybe the strawberry syrup and the chocolate off the top or whatever. And you go, there's your strawberry sundae, and you go, well, where's the syrup and the chocolate? You go, well, you need to pay extra for those to make it more fun. It's exactly that kind of. It's just it's weird, and it's weird that we seem to accept it again because we're pre-ordering, because we're spending money, because we're willing to give developers money up front for products that we haven't even got yet. I think it enables them. It's enabling them to do this to us, And yeah, that's one of the shocking things is how game development is designed. Game development has changed with these with these live service games to remove, and there's many examples of it. Out of the games that I've played, kind of had a look at again recently, like Elder Scrolls Online, for example, which is an MMO. But if you pay a subscription, you get like a bag of holding essentially that scoops up limitless amounts of crafting resources. And there are a lot of crafting resources, and without it, your bag space and bank space are quite limited. So if you don't subscribe, you almost can't play the game properly because you've just got all this stuff that you can't hold on to. So it's these kind of they create these kind of roadblocks for you, and then they give you the rather than developing your character going forward, like a role playing game should do. They allow you to pay for progress that really should already be part of the game, and they put these roadblocks in the way to make you look at the store and go, "Oh, I'm just going to subscribe because this is just stupid," and that's. But I think that's where we are with these like always online games, whether it's a live service or an MMO. They're designing games now with frustrations, and then they're offering you the cure to the frustration in the cash shop. But all of these things are obviously all combined. As I said, like the live service, cash shop, loot boxes, pre-ordering, playing pre-alpha, beta 1, beta 2, beta 15, whatever it may be. They're all part of the same issue. And I go back to what I said before. I'm not wanting to sound like an old fart and like, your good old days, but yes, if you went out if you went out to the shops in the 90s and bought Baldur's Gate 2 and you brought it home, you had a complete finished game with, if you want to do everything, hundreds of hours of content probably, without then having to go and pay for conveniences or whatever it may be. There are some games still that you've got that. Cyberpunk, for example, I must have played for 1,000 hours, played for it multiple times, and I haven't had to pay any extra money on top of that. So you do still get these games, but for the most part, when I'm looking at my list of games that I've played this year, many of them have got an online many of them you need to be online to play, and that's a way of getting you to spend more and more money. But it's tricky, as I said at the start of the money section, is that games are in comparison to some games in the past, games are cheaper to buy now. But there must be a better way of doing it. Just create a game and all the content you've got, put it into one version, and maybe charge a bit more for that version, and then maybe have a cash shop with stuff in, so people have got a choice. But people have got a choice whether to do it or not then, and then that's where we need to self-control ourselves. But don't put stuff in the game that's RNG and stuff to exploit people with those kind of addictions. That's not good. But yeah, it's I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how things. I'm not sure how things will change going forward. It even got games that won Game of the Year, like Baldur's Gate 3 this year when it was released. It's funny how people kind of seem to skip over the issues that game had. I went through chapter 1, and then as I was going through chapter 2 and moving into the later stages of the game, I just kept getting all sorts of crap. And it was kind of like, oh yeah, Baldur's Gate 3 is Game of the Year. It had a few issues when it came out at the end of the game, but and that's still not acceptable. That shouldn't be acceptable. But anyway, I'll move on to the final part now, and that's the political side of things. Gaming has never been as politicised as it is now. In fact, gaming has never really been politicised until recently. And it's not the weak argument that I hear from people on I'm going to use the word woke. You might not like it. I don't like it particularly because I don't like, that side of ideology have taken words and repurposed them to fit their own means. Like what racism is, for example, because they've changed it so that they can say things, and you can't call them racist because they've changed the meaning of the word. So I don't like that, even if it's a word that's been appropriated and is now being used as a derogatory term by people that I, for the most part, kind of agree with their sentiment. But I'm going to use the word anyway because it's just easier. You know what I mean, primarily, I think. But the weak argument I always hear is, you just, gaming, for example, has always had politics in. It's you just don't want any politics in gaming, and that's a weak excuse because anyone with just even a base IQ can see that any creation, any medium or whatever it may be, where there's conflict, where there are sides, Even conflict within the same side. You could class you can class under the label of politics. It's not like party politicking like we might understand it with Labour versus Conservative or Democrat versus Republican or whatever it may be. But there's still politics involved. There's politics in Mario. You've got Mario fighting Bowser. For whatever the reasons that are in conflict, you could put that under the branch of politics. I mean, if you've never seen it before, it's really interesting. Go and look at the stuff about the release of the game Tetris. Literally real world politics, national politics surrounding the release of that game. So that's just a weak argument that you hear, and as soon as I hear that argument from someone, I just ignore them because it's clear that they haven't thought about it, and they're regurgitating phrases that they think work to shut people up. So I generally just ignore them. Of course, I understand that everything is political, and you could read politics into pretty much nearly everything, even where there isn't conflict. The Care Bears, for example, you could probably find something political within that. So, we understand that. So I thought I'd point that out as just a bit of a preface for this section. What we're talking about is something being politicised to push through someone's ideologies and to force them through. That's what's happening with gaming at the moment. Not just gaming, TV, film, advertising, whatever it is as well. And gaming has never been used in that way. And as I said, that's not to say that people haven't created games in the past and with a message, maybe a strong message, but not to the extent where it is now, where people are using it just as gaming is just being used as a platform to push people's ideologies through, these woke ideologies. It's the same with something like look at Doctor Who, for example. The most recent Doctor Who's, the Christmas specials and New Year specials and stuff. They're not recognisable as Doctor Who because it's not really about Doctor Who anymore. It's about you've got a character called Doctor Who, but everything surrounding it is really about the creators just pushing these ideologies through, ticking boxes and wanting to force it through and ram it in your face for whatever their reason may be. Quite often it's financial, but whatever it is, it is what it is. It's not Doctor Who is not Doctor Who anymore. That's not what it's about. It's just a platform for these people, and it's the same with gaming. You can see it going back quite a few years now. This year, I think, was one of the most hilarious ones. I watched through. There's a guy that I really enjoy his videos. He can be a bit kind of anti-woke sometimes, and he kind of sometimes he strays into a bit insulting, but for the most part he's quite intelligent. His arguments are quite intelligent. When he reviews games, I think he's normally bang on. But he's one of these that kind of, I'm not sure if he hate plays them, but he was suffering through Spider-Man 2, and I watched a couple of hours of him playing it, and I was just astonished. I was astonished how politicised the game is, where it didn't even really belong. It was the Spider-Man 2 game on the PlayStation just looked like it was created by someone who just wanted to highlight all of these things, and that's all the game was about. Like all the side quests he did were just some kind of woke involvement, some kind of representation. But every single one, it wasn't like it was now and again. It was every single side quest, and by the end of it, I literally wanted to stick forks in my eyeballs. I think he might have done it at one point. I mean, I don't know how he kept going to play through the game. I guess for him, it's content, right? So that's fair enough. It's this year has been absolutely bizarre, but that's what's happening. So why is it happening? Well, as I said, there's always been politics in games. There's always been people that maybe use their games to subtly put a message across, and this happens in everything. Like when I go talking about Doctor Who, when I go back and like my Doctor Who was Tom Baker. I mean, obviously he should be everyone's Doctor Who, really. Like Tom Baker's the Don of Doctor Who's. There's no question. But I got into Doctor Who into the John Pertwee era, then moving into Tom Baker, and that was my favourite period. And even watching the Tom Baker Doctor Who's back then, there was some messaging, and they were talking about current social issues sometimes within the storylines. Obviously then, though, these people were talented, and there was a meritocracy, and they were hired because they were talented. And these people had been working on Doctor Who for a long time, and they understood the lore and the universe. So this messaging would come across most often as a choice. You know, they would treat you like adults. They wouldn't say, they wouldn't insult you, first of all. So they wouldn't say, I think this is what's in the program. If you don't agree with what's in the program, then you're a bigot of some kind. They would present you with something, and then because they treated you like an adult, and because they were talented enough, you know, they would let you make a decision. It wouldn't just be this is good and this is bad. Even the villains and stuff you would sympathise with to a certain extent. So it was a choice. You know, they weren't whacking you in the face with a massive woke knob. This is what I think. Whack. You know, if you don't agree with me, then you're a bigot. It was, but also sometimes it was so smart and so subtle, like many comics back during the early era of comics and, you know, Marvel and DC. Sometimes you didn't even notice it. I mean, I've watched some Tom Baker episodes before, and then I've looked online, and you know, someone's talking about the particular episode, and they say, you know, what did you think of this, or what about this? And I go, I didn't really notice that actually, and I go back and watch it again, and then you kind of notice it. So it's all about talent, it's all about intelligence, it's all about how you're putting this across. And it's the same with gaming as well. You know, in the past there would have been games that would have been talking about the current social, cultural issues, but it was done in an intelligent way, and it wasn't forced through, and it wasn't someone trying to force an opinion on you. And when I say force, we're really talking about getting close to or crossing the line into fascism. You know, fascism doesn't require you to walk along the street goose stepping and whacking people in the face with the butt of a gun. You know, you can easily step into fascism by trying to force your opinions on someone else, whether it's trying to bring them into law. So you've legally got to do this now. You've legally got to respect my pronouns. Bullshit. F off. Or if you don't do this, we're going to shame you. We're going to call you names. We're going to call your employer. All that. You know, that's fascism, essentially. As I said, you know, fascism doesn't only happen during war. You don't need to walk down the street using guns or violence to enforce things on people, and that's not the only form of fascism. It's funny because I think it was Winston Churchill who said that. I think it was after World War II. I'm not sure if he coined the phrase. I think Ronald Reagan used it later on, but I think Winston Churchill said that in the future fascism will return in the guise of liberalism. I think was a phrase that he used, and I think that's exactly what's happening at the moment. But I think what's happened here is that you've got a games company, and you've got people there who think differently, because diversity of thought is obviously the most important thing. Diversity of course, is another word that's been reappropriated and changed to mean something else. You know, when they say diverse now, they don't mean people thinking differently, whether it's politically or religiously or whatever it may be. It means that so this is now diverse. Yeah, but it's not diverse though, because all you've done is you've changed one group of people for another group of people. So if it's mostly all the same group of people, it's still not diverse, but that's what they mean by diverse. So you may have had a game company that's diverse, but then what's happened, I mean, you know, a lot of this is conjecture on my part, but I've done some research on it. I think probably what looks like it's happened is that this goes back to the 60s actually as well. I was watching a video recently of a guy who, a very smart guy, used to be a TV producer back in the 60s in Canada and a comedian as well. And he did a video recently talking about growing up in the 60s and being at college and university and stuff, and how basically how culturally amazing things are now in comparison to how they were then, and some of the things that he saw. And people now moaning about whatever it is they're complaining about have really got no idea, and I kind of agree with that. That's not to say things are perfect now, but really in comparison, it's like night and day. But I think what's happened recently is that people are leaving education, whether it's university, college, whatever it may be, leaving their campuses and whatever, and they're going out into the world, and they've been pushed this white guilt thing or male guilt thing. And they've been sent out, just to keep it brief, they've been sent out and they've said, look, you know, you're white, your ancestors, you know, you're really bad, and you need to go out and atone for all this and whatever. And they've been brainwashed into it, and they've moved into all of these current like media areas. Because when they was at university or wherever it was, they've done like media courses, journalistic courses. They've also done a course. They don't really need to do courses in cultural or social issues or affairs, because it seems that even like maths and English are kind of teaching this like critical race theory or whatever this rubbish is. So they're coming out into the world with these thoughts in their head, and they're going into, from a gaming point of view, games journalism and game development. And they've kind of swung the balance, because I imagine at a games company, say in the 90s, you had a group of people and they thought differently. Maybe some were radically one way, maybe some radically the other way. But in the end, they came together and they discussed what they wanted to do, and the quality of the games generally spoke for themselves. But there was a balance politically and ideologically, so it wasn't one way or the other. Now, obviously, all of these people are leaving education and they're moving into these areas, and things have swung. And even if you've got people at these companies who kind of don't have these woke ideologies, they stay quiet because they can see that they're in the minority. And as we've seen, although it's real, I'm really sad that people are so head in the sand about this thing. Even people that I know in my own family, when you listen to them talking, they watch like all they watch is Netflix or like comedy-based political shows on the BBC. So of course, all you see are the same people. Like on TV and wherever it is, there's no conflict anymore. There's no challenge anymore. Everyone thinks the same. Obviously, they don't, because we're all different, and it's impossible to get 100 people in a room and they all think the same, unless you go to a rally where everyone's arranged to get together because they think the same. But they're watching these political comedy shows on the BBC by people who are not nowhere near as talented as they were before. They haven't been chosen on merit. They've been chosen because of their skin colour or because of their gender, or whatever it may be. And they're just listening to one side. I mean, I can't remember, other than someone like Nigel Farage, for example, who they get on television occasionally, just on mainstream television, just to laugh at, basically. And he is a laughable character, I will admit. I'm struggling to remember the last time I saw anything on mainstream TV that was where the message about, say, for example, the COVID vaccine was different, or lockdowns was different, or I haven't seen anyone debating or questioning like the current woke issues like gender or race or whatever. Whenever this happens, everyone thinks the same, and of course they don't. But if they don't, then they keep their mouth shut. And I don't see how that's good for a healthy society where all you're getting is one message. It's like the environment. You never hear anything different about the environment on mainstream media. But there's a load of research and a load of scientists out there that disagree, but you just don't see them. Or people will watch Planet Earth 3 or some doddering old fool going on again about something or something or other's dying off. And they go, oh God, this is terrible. But they're not looking at anything else. It's just they're just listening to doddering old fools on the BBC, or people that used to be people who are not great scientists, who actually weren't great pop stars either back in the day when they were a pop star. But they're just lapping this stuff up. And I'm not saying that some of the stuff that they're saying isn't true, but you need to have some opposition. You need to have some pushback. You need to have some conflict. That's what we're all about. We're all about conflict, debating. And in the end, hopefully coming to some sort of agreement that's not one extreme or the other. But yeah, you're just not seeing that at all in anything at the moment, on any TV channel, whether it's streaming or mainstream. And as I said, when you do get an opposing opinion, it's just people to laugh at, or they get shouted down really, really quickly. It's like I watched a shot from a BBC political chat thing the other day. This video was from last year sometime, and there was a guy on there who's a comedian and author, and he'd wrote a book about men and men's problems and stuff. And there was a little segment where they were supposed to talk about that, but obviously the BBC knew what they were doing. They got these two women who were real piece of shits, and one of them was a real misandrist. She's well known for not giving a shit about men at all. And they started talking about it. And then these two women just went off on him, going on about women's problems. He was like, well, hang on a sec. The presenter has asked me about my book, which is about men's issues. This section's got nothing to do with women, but they wouldn't have it. One of the women actually went out of her way to basically just gloss over and to consider male suicide as not important. Afterwards, she had to come out and apologise for it. She wasn't really sorry because she's a piece of shit. But there you go. That's the sort of people that the BBC get on. That's the sort of stuff you get fed. But it was interesting that this bloke's, you could tell what this bloke was thinking. I don't understand what's going on. I mean, you've got me on specifically to talk about my book about some men's issues, and I've just been attacked by these two women who are obviously misandrists and pieces of shit. But yeah, it was a bizarre watch, and you could see that he thought it was bizarre as well. But that's the sort of thing you get on the mainstream TV. So bringing it back to gaming, if I can, yeah. So that's what's happening. So the majority of the media, games journalism, and games development has been invaded, has been infiltrated by this woke stuff, and that's why we're seeing so much of it in everything. It's funny because you get occasionally, like, you might know someone who is like, oh, conspiracy theory seems to be the popular term for the wokies at the moment. Everything's conspiracy theory. It doesn't agree with what they think. But there's someone that I know, like a friend, and we spoke about it, and they were a bit like head in the sand. You're just a conspiracy theory. None of this stuff's happening. And then a little while ago, I was speaking to them, and they said, "You know what, you were right." And we had a bit of a laugh, and I said, "Well, what was it that kind of made you change your mind?" And they're a gamer as well, so it was some of the stuff they were seeing in gaming. But one of the things was I was watching an advert, and the advert was this fat ginger bloke with a beard, and that's how white men are portrayed in the UK at the moment in advertising. Unless you're Ant and Dec, or unless you're gay, that's how you're portrayed, as fat, ginger, bearded, geeky, no testosterone, that kind of person. And he said this guy was married to, or their partner was a black woman, and that they had these kids that they could not possibly have produced together. And I looked at it and I thought, this is odd. And then, of course, like they said, they couldn't unsee it, like, because every advert's like it. And they just kept seeing it over and over again. And in the end, they realised that it's all about this tick boxing ideology that's going on in the background. And it's not so much that, and like for both of us, it wasn't so much that who was on the screen, although I do feel that a country should be representative of its population. I understand sometimes that maybe to balance things out, maybe things need to be more diverse. So maybe minorities you need to represent them on TV or whatever more, so that there's more of a balance. But at the end of the day, I think that, like any country, if I go to a country in Africa or Asia or wherever it may be, what I'm seeing should be representative of the indigenous, or we're not allowed to be called indigenous, are we, if you're white? I think it's not a thing. It's funny, I watched a video the other day about a scientist from Norway who was trying to do some research on indigenous Norwegian people, and he looked into Google, of all places, a stupid place to look if you want anything that's not woke. And he said that the Sami in northern areas came up as an indigenous people, but Norwegian people didn't. And he was like, I don't understand this. As a scientist and historian, like, I know that there were people in Norway before the Sami got there. So who were those people? But it was almost like Google had erased them because they're just the general white people in Norway, and had picked the Sami. But the Sami had not come until later, but after whoever the people were in Norway. But you couldn't find out anything about them because they just weren't showing up, and they weren't being. I mean, he obviously being as educated as he was, he knew who they were, but he was trying to find out more information about them. But they weren't even recognised as indigenous people. So I think that culturally it should be representative, and unfortunately, some people kind of feel it unfortunate that people in the UK evolved in a place where it rains a lot. Okay, so your skin's white. That's all skin colour is, really, at the end of the day. It's just evolution, science and biology. It rains all the time. It's always grey. So we've got white skin. That's life. That's just how it is. Yeah, but it's bizarre because it's. I just think that, as I said before, I can understand something leaning too far as like a course correction to represent people, but I still think that culturally, if I go to a country, and I feel the same about the UK, I don't just feel the same about other countries because there's black people, there are Asian people there. You should feel the same about everything. I feel that a country should be representative of its culture, of its cultural history. But obviously, the other cultures that have come in should also be included, but not taking over. So that the other people are just ignored generally, and they're trying to change. They're trying to change the face or the representation of what the UK is to the outside or to people watching it. It's quite weird, but there's quite a lot of programs at the moment in the UK about trying to change history as well, with regards to cultural stuff and whatever it may be. But there you go. But yeah, sorry, I keep sidetracking, but then that was the whole point of the video, to try and include things that are relevant maybe or not. But anyway, getting back to gaming, you've got this woke invasion into gaming, and you can see that a lot of people, particularly from a journalistic point of view, are not actually gamers. I mean, there's been quite a lot of reviewers caught out bringing up some woke issue in a game that they got triggered by, and then it being pointed out to them that if you play the game for a bit longer, what you're talking about was explained. But obviously, I didn't play the game hardly at all to get to that point. And so they were caught out. It's quite a lot of those kind of things. I think there was a journalist or a game, I could call them journalists, it's stretching it a lot, isn't it? But one of Jim Sterling's friends did a review about a song or something that was written in a game. And they got all triggered about it. And it turned out that the meaning of it was not what they had, how they'd interpreted it. And before they wrote their piece, they didn't bother to investigate it. They just put it out there moaning about stuff as they do. So some of these people are not even really gamers. They've left university or whatever, and gaming was the only thing that would take them in. IGN or whoever it is, people who feel the same way. And of course, when you get this influx of people with the same ideology, they then employ people who think the same. So eventually, the company ends up being very, very one-sided. And I go back to what I said before. There's no diversity of thought. So that's what's happened. But what you would normally get is like natural selection. This is the big thing now we're coming to, natural selection, right? So these people come in. Games are terrible. So these people are fired, and maybe it goes back to a meritocracy where people are hired on merit rather than who they are, where they're from. But you've got things like the ESG and the DIE, who are two groups of investors. And they're woke enablers, basically. The developers are woke for pay, and these are the woke enablers. And so what the ESG is, for example, is a group of big corporate investors who are currently pushing this woke agenda. And depending on your ESG rating, which is really how woke you are, the ESG, if it was implemented correctly, seems like it might be quite a good idea. But obviously, politically things are not implemented correctly, are they? And quite often it's always to one extreme. But yeah, essentially ESG is, if depending on how woke you are, we'll fund you, and the company gets an ESG rating based on different woke ideologies. You might call them environmental or social criteria, or whatever it is, but essentially it's been pushed so far that it's really under the woke banner, I would say. And so that's what's currently enabling it. So that's why everything we're seeing is so radical that way. It's funny because I literally, I don't know how I managed it. At the end of it, I just wanted to jump out the window. But I watched one of the Game Awards things this year, and it was just shockingly terrible. I mean, not only was it cringy and not really reflective of gaming at all, it was also incredibly woke and politicised, and developers wonder why games are failing, and when they fail, they call you names. I mean, most of the games that were on this show, and it could have been a bias, it probably was. Most of the games that were on this show, the protagonist was a black female, generally with a buzz cut on one side. The type, sneering, kind of terribly written girl boss type characters. And that's not an issue in isolation. But that's not the target demographic of gaming. Yes, many people play games nowadays, many different people, including black women. And why would you not want there to be that representation? But when every game has got it, and then when the games come out, they don't work, and they call you names like racist or whatever, then I'm not quite sure what to say. It was weird because when the Baldur's Gate 3 released a little demo, I think this was a couple of years ago now. It was a little while ago. This was long before the pre-release and the pre-alpha and stuff and the alpha. And the Larian head, who, bearing in mind, is a pasty blonde bloke from Scandinavia, I believe, complained that the majority of characters that were created on the Baldur's Gate demo, Baldur's Gate 3 demo, were white males. First of all, why would that ever be a problem? And secondly, that's obviously the target. That's obviously the audience that's buying the game. So why would you then insult? Why would you then be racist essentially and insult them because of their choice of gender? That's just racist and sexist, really. If we're using the terms as the definitions of what they should mean, even though he's white, he can still be racist towards white people. So it's just bizarre way of thinking, and it's obviously that's the demographic of the people that are playing the game. It's probably mostly American and European, certainly in the segment that he was talking about. Maybe Baldur's Gate 3 in Africa, people are creating black characters. That's fine. Maybe in China, maybe people are creating characters representative of themselves. That's fine. It shouldn't be an issue, but it was an issue for him, and that's exactly the sort of mentality you've got with these wokies. Yeah, and it's just bizarre to see this recurring theme of creating games not particularly well, poorly written characters, poorly written quests, and forcing a certain character upon you, and then complaining when the game doesn't sell. It's just a revolving door at the moment, and I'm not quite sure where we get off, where things will change. But that's kind of what's happening. You've got these big, massive investors investing in this stuff, and a company gets an ESG rating, depending on how woke they are, and you get some money, you get free money. I guess that's why they're doing it. They probably also think that way, obviously, as well, but you now get paid for it. What I find quite shameful, the most shameful, particularly as someone who's I'm an old school lefty, and I'm quite radical, but I'm a lefty who thinks that I'm not into any of this intersectionality bollocks. If you're poor or struggling, or you need help, or you're living in poverty, whatever it may be, then you deserve as much help as anyone else. It shouldn't be based on your colour of your skin or your gender. If you're a white bloke, if you're a white kid and you're struggling, then you deserve as much help as anyone else, no matter who they are. That's the old lefty rule. The old lefty rule is really about privilege comes from class, status, and money. It's not always about race or gender or whatever it may be. That's kind of crept in with this intersectionality thing over the last decade or couple of decades, whatever it may be. So I'm an old school lefty. That's where I'm coming from. But that's not where we are. It's not, the left is just a shambles. It's full of this kind of woke stuff. But yeah, it's I'll bring it back to gaming. The most shameful thing I find from a left point of view is that the people, the investors, the group of investors working through ESG, for example, are some of the biggest corporate, Bond villain scumbags you could ever imagine. I mean, people moan about Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, but these guys are real villains. But the left are accepting this money. These woke people at these companies are accepting this ESG investment because it's pushing their agenda. And that's what I find the most embarrassing as someone who considers themselves a lefty as well. Just an embarrassment, that they're taking this money when we should be pushing back against this stuff and refusing the money and spitting in their faces. But instead we're just taking the money. We're taking this massive corporate Bond villain, probably illegally obtained money, certainly exploitatively obtained money. And they're taking it and spending it on absolute trash. It was a shame to see CD Projekt Red get an ESG rating about a year ago. I didn't find out until quite recently, but I'm not surprised. Over the last year or so, they've started putting up this real woke kind of stuff on their Twitter feed. It's got no relation to games. I mean, I don't understand why they didn't create a different Twitter feed for that stuff. This is about gaming. But you started to get this kind of stuff every now and again, this really radical woke stuff. You know what I'm talking about. And then obviously the expansion comes out, and the expansion is praised and stuff by certain areas who are more that way inclined. And of course it is, because the characters are more diverse. Bloody, you got the girl boss Myers and all that kind of stuff. You know, it's not more diverse. Obviously, you're just swapping a group of characters, swapping a group of people for another. Really, so it's not diverse, but you know that's what they call it. But yeah, it's sad to see that, because you've got CD Projekt Red creating a game in the cyberpunk universe that is all about big corporations treading on poor people. That's part of the idea behind it anyway. There's a big focus of corporations, and yet they're accepting money from like really dirty scumbag corporations to create games in the cyberpunk universe. I find that quite shameful. I'm shamed for them. I'm sure it's an irony that they're fully aware of, but you know, free money, and when your game gets infiltrated, when your company gets infiltrated by this kind of stuff, you know, you've got to keep doing it, and you've got to tick some boxes to get the investment anyway. But it's a shame, yeah, because I kind of saw CD Projekt Red as one of the companies that would still be kind of free of this kind of thing, but or would be more independent from a development point of view. But once you accept the ESG rating, you accept the funding, then you have to adhere to certain criteria. It's funny because someone put up something on a Reddit a little while ago saying I'm proud of the fact that CD Projekt Red has stayed independent, and it was pointed out to them that they hadn't, you know, because if you accept funding, particularly from a group of people that seem so radically in one direction, then you kind of lose your independence, and they're already adhering to it within the game on their Twitter feed and whatever. So yeah, the weird thing as well is that you could see the change in the attitudes towards the game and CD Projekt Red over the last year or two as well. When 2.0 and the expansion come out, people were suddenly proclaiming it as, like, particularly on Reddit and some other social medias, and some woke reviewers on YouTube were kind of proclaiming it as like the Cyberpunk is now redeemed and whatnot. But for someone like me who's played Cyberpunk for, as I said, like 1,000 hours or so, played through the game many times, and someone who I played through the game twice before the expansion came out, just so I could see the differences. Someone who's done that and has got all that time in the game, like, I know that when 2.0 came out, the game was basically exactly the same. Even with all of the skill tree changes and some of the mechanical changes or whatever it may be, when you're playing through Cyberpunk, the moment-to-moment gameplay was exactly the same. Because I played through it twice before, and I played through it twice after directly when 2.0 came out. Obviously the expansion has new content, so that's new, but that was far weaker content than the vanilla game. But even that's been like, you know, I see people on social media, mostly in these little woke bubbles, going on about how great the characters are in comparison to the vanilla games. But really, you know, I mean, I just don't understand it, really. I mean, when Jackie died in the car, spoilers, sorry, in the vanilla game, like, I found that quite an emotional moment. But when at the end, when I'm whatever decision I made with Soul Me, for example, I didn't feel any emotion at all. I thought the characters were flat, boring, they were written a certain way. I was already a bit fed up with it anyway, but when I got to the Myers bit and she was doing all the girl boss kind of like Mary Sue stuff, I was like, oh yeah, I'm kind of done. So comparing the writing and the characterization of those characters with, you know, like Judy, Jackie, whatever it may be, just a million miles apart. But, you know, because the company and now the game fits more into that ideological side, then people suddenly start liking it, and some of the reviewers started liking it, and you know. But my point of this was that a lot of this was political, because the game was exactly the same. As I said, I played through the game twice after 2.0, and my session-to-session gameplay, running around doing all the gigs and stuff, was exactly the same. But it was lauded as this massive redemption when it really wasn't, because the game was brilliant before 2.0. Strangely, 2.1 seems as... I haven't played 2.1 yet, I want to. But it seems as though that's had... The changes in that game look like it's going to have more of a mechanical impact on the world and your game, your moment-to-moment gameplay. But they've already blown their load to 2.0, so they can't suddenly say, oh, no, 2.1 is a redemption, because they've already done all that. So 2.1 has come out, and there's been less fanfare around that. But that looks like it's actually got more, mechanically will change your my gameplay more, just like moment to moment, session to session gameplay. So that's quite interesting. I'm actually quite interested to look at that to see how it goes. But that's it. I mean, while you've got the funding coming through from the ESG, there really isn't any sign of things stopping, because they're being paid to create this stuff and to push this message, and that's what's happening. I know some people will say it's all conspiracy theory and whatever it may be. Some people might think it's good because it's bringing attention to our current social and cultural climate. But that just falls flat to me. I think that there are intelligent ways of doing it. There are ways of doing it without trying to force it on people. There are ways of doing it without calling them names if they don't agree with you, and that's just not what's happening. It was interesting with Starfield this year, where Az's rant on Heels versus Babyface, and people focused on the rant. But obviously, as he said, it wasn't just about that. It's about all of our entertainment at the moment. And also, it's not just about that in Starfield. Running through Starfield is all of this woke trash. Running through all of the AAA games, pretty much, it's the same, because they're all getting this funding. And also, what might surprise you is that advertising companies, TV companies, film companies are also getting this this funding as well. So if you watch your favourite book that's been converted to a TV show on Netflix or whatever, and you notice that maybe the white male hero is not now as prominent, they've brought some other characters to the front. If the writing and the actual conversion of the book seems terrible, it's probably had ESG funding. Even Disney, the supposed size of their company, have got an ESG rating, and they're getting funding. And that's why we've just got this conveyor belt of woke stuff at the moment, because it's being enabled. These people, these scumbags who we should all be fighting back against, are enabling this stuff, and that's where we are. And it's not really going to change. In film and TV and stuff, I think there's starting to be a big pushback. I saw someone else talking about this recently in comparison to gaming. At the moment in gaming, gamers just like games. And they've got their favourite franchises like Diablo 4. And if Diablo 5 comes out, no matter what, they could install Diablo 4 and, I don't know, Diablo could come out of the screen, go around and slaughter their family and then go back again, and they would still pre-order Diablo 5. In gaming, I guess we're a bit more, I guess the thing is that these are not adaptations, are they? So if you're a fan of a book, say Lord of the Rings, you're a fan of the book and you love the book. And if Tolkien wrote another book, you'd buy, or if his son releases something, you buy it. But if someone adapts it and it's terrible, like the Rings of Power, you can just ignore it, and you're not really missing out because you've still got the books. Whereas when a Diablo 4 game comes out, that's the next Diablo. It's not an adaptation, that's actually the next real Diablo. So you buy it because you want to play Diablo. So the pushback in gaming it's starting. I've seen it a bit, but it's not going on so much. People are still buying games, pre-ordering games. But in TV and film, there's a real pushback. People are just not going to the cinema to watch this woke Disney garbage. People are not watching these terrible Star Wars and Marvel series on Disney Plus. They're unsubscribing. The only way they can get subscribers at the moment is to offer it for £1 or whatever it is, or $1 or something, 99 cents. So people are switching off here. There's the funding still going through. So I'm not sure when the real change will happen. I know. Was it Bob Iger recently said that they'd looked at this stuff and they were aware that pushing all this ideological stuff through wasn't working financially, but then they go and release Echo, which was just another disaster. Whether these programs are going to come out anyway because they were already in production, I don't know. Maybe there'll be a change, but I don't know. I mean, if I had £1 for every time Kathleen Kennedy was going to get sacked from Lucasfilm, and please, for the love of God, get rid of her, I'd be a millionaire, and it still hasn't happened, But so we'll see. We'll see from a change if change is going to happen. But from a gaming point of view, I think at the moment we're still buying games. There isn't really there's not an economic downturn in gaming, a financial crisis. So we're still buying them. But I have seen people start to push back, and it's running through most games. I'll go back to Diablo 3 briefly before I finish the video. That had the funniest woke moment of the year. It was I was underground somewhere in some dungeon or whatever, and I rescued a gnome, and the gnome started going on this diatribe about gnomes being oppressed in Baldur's Gate by the evil capitalists, and it was going on. It got worse and worse and worse because the gnome was using terms that you see modern woke people use on social media, and obviously it doesn't work. It doesn't fit. You think, well, what? At least have the creative talent to invent, to try to apply language that makes sense and words and slang that make sense. For all that I'm worried about Cyberpunk 2, because I think it's going to be a massive ESG fest. At least like the slang, the words they use, the dialogue in the games is true to the Cyberpunk universe. And actually, I think they kind of made up some of their own slang and words that fit within the universe. But when you're playing Baldur's Gate 3 and there's a gnome going off and they sound like some blue-haired placard wielder at a rally, it just takes you out the moment. But the funniest bit was at the end, I'm paraphrasing, but they said something along the lines of, join us and be on the right side of history. And at that moment, I had to get up just to breathe because I was laughing, not with it, at it so much, at the ludicrousness that someone had actually put that into the... it's Larian, so I'm not surprised, as I said before, about the head and what he said. But I had to get up because I'd have fallen off my chair otherwise. It was hilarious. So everything's got it. All the games have got it. And I think this year, I've seen some people saying that this year has been great for games. I'm scratching my head, really. I know that there are people who obviously love Bethesda or Todd Howard or whatever, and they're defending Starfield and whatnot. I know there's that group of people, but like to say that the whole year was a great year for games, I don't know. There have been some good indie games, obviously, but I think people overplay the indie stuff. For every Vampire Saviour is it Vampire Saviour or Vampire Hunter or whatever it was called, that people like, and Asmongold plays, so it gains a following. There are probably 15, 20 games that are the same that no one really sees and they're not very good. For every Valheim, there's like 100 indie games that are probably not very good, and don't really sell that well. So I don't even really think it like that saves it particularly. But that's the message that, as I said, as I go back to what I said previously about messaging on TV, and there's only one message about the environment or COVID or whatever it may be. It's the same with gaming. There are certain areas that there are certain reviewers and people talking on social media where gaming fits right into their radical ideological wheelhouse, and so they will convince themselves and try and convince everyone else that it's been a great year when it's been terrible. But as I said, I don't know where it stops or whatever. I guess the woke stuff will probably carry on for the foreseeable future until you get a pushback, or maybe until the actual funding stops. If you don't know what ESG is, go and have a look. That's the other thing I find that's annoying with the head in the sand kind of conspiracy theory people, is that all this stuff is out there to investigate. If you can't be asked to investigate it, to find out about it, then that's your problem, but it's all out there. ESG have got a website, I think, that talks about what they do. I've looked at it, and as I said before, like looking at it, you kind of think, you look at some of it and you think, well, actually, these are quite good ideas, but they're not being implemented that way. They're being pushed through radically and to the extreme, and any extreme on whatever side is not a good thing. But while the funding goes on, I guess it's where we are. As I say, like I had a New Year's resolution, basically, that I told myself that I'm not going to pre-order any more games. I'm going to see what they're like first, and if they're full of this ESG woke stuff, like I'm doing with TV and film, I just won't support it, and it doesn't get my money. It's going to be hard with Stalker 2, as I said, but I'm hoping these guys... All I want from Stalker 2 is a game that fits into the culture of that part of Europe properly and accurately. Even though it's a fantasy game, it doesn't matter. I want to see it reflected in the peoples and the cultures and traditions and stuff and whatever it may be surrounding the game. If there's any whiff of bringing in some kind of forced diversity just to tick boxes and stuff. I'll unfortunately be out, which is gutting, because Stalker games are one of my favourite series, and actually the best game I've played over the last 5 years, I would say, is the Gamma mod for Stalker. I think the Gamma mod is a complete mod of another complete mod. I can't remember what it's called offhand, but if you like the Stalker games, then play Gamma, or the complete mod that Gamma is based on, because it gives you like an open world version of Stalker, which is just fantastic. And if you're interested in older games as well, you want to play some old classics, then look up Exodos as well. You need to download it on a torrent, I think, so that might be an issue for some people, but it's basically got over 7,000 DOS games, and there are some real classics on there. Look at the old LucasArts point and click adventures, Scum Adventures, Monkey Islands and Indiana Jones and whatever it may be. Dungeon Master, the Art of Beholder games, lots of D&D. If you're into D&D and you like the early D&D stuff, loads of D&D games on there as well. TIE Fighter, X-Wing, early. There's loads of early DOS LucasArts games that are just wow. So try that out as well if you're looking for something. If you're fed up with all this stuff and you're not going to be spending your money on as many modern games, look at some older stuff. Even don't go back that far. Like GOG's got loads of great stuff that you can play. I'd recommend games like Fallout 1 and 2, maybe Fallout 3. I'm just playing through New Vegas at the moment. The first Deus Ex game. There's a load of stuff out there. If you never played Doom or Doom 2, go back and play Doom 2, Quake. Just amazing stuff. Anyway, thanks for listening or watching or whatever it is you're doing. I don't know what gameplay I'm going to put on this video. I haven't got much. I might just have to repeat some stuff, because it is mostly about the talking side, the podcast side of it anyway. Thanks for listening. I know that there'll be loads of people that will probably listen to this and they'll be up in arms and they'll unsubscribe or whatever, but you're welcome to. It's my channel, and to be quite frank, if you don't like it, then just go. I'd be interested in any comments, any sensible comments, if anyone can make any sensible comments, that'd be cool. Maybe I can do a video, maybe discussing anything that anyone's got to say about stuff in the video, or maybe no one will watch it. I don't know. I'm not even sure if I'll put it up. Anyway, thanks for watching, listening. I'll speak to you again soon.